Today's webinar is based on the book, The Intentional Board by Kent Stroman. So Kent, glad that you're here with us. You've been doing these webinars for a long time, but I don't think we've had a focus on this book. Of course, we're not going to be able to get to all of it, but you want to do just a quick introduction to the book, maybe how that all got started before we jump into the content today?
Wow. Well, it's interesting, Aaron, and thanks for that invitation. Interesting that we're having this conversation today because this morning I was thinking about it. Boy, this is unbelievable, but it was 7 years ago this month that the Intentional Board was published. And the um, probably the biggest impetus in this book being written is this such a familiar, repeated series of phone calls that I get, and it's usually either from a board member, maybe a board officer, or an executive director. And so many times the theme is we need some help. And I'll just ask, well, what do we need help with? And I'll hear, I just feel like we're not on the same page. So real quick, by show of hands, those who are on the screen, anybody ever feel that way as it relates to the work of the board and the organization? Feel like sometimes we're just not on the same page, and I think it's almost unanimous. Jane is smiling. Fortunately, nobody's crying. Oh, Deb looks like
No,
Deb.
that's a crying.
Uh,
That's a cryy face.
yeah.
I need help.
Yeah, so just know that you're not alone, right? And anyhow, in kind of in response to that, if you look at the subtitle, why your board doesn't work and how to fix it. And in some ways, I thought that was a little bit of an edgy subtitle, but decided to go with it anyhow. And so, Aaron, when you ask me about kind of a highlight, in just a minute, I'm going to zero in on something that's a core part of the book. But as I thought about what are some really common themes, probably one of the most common is this whole idea of everybody needs to stay in their own lane, right? And the stay in your lane concept, I think for me began even before I got to elementary school. Everybody always wants everybody else to stay in their own lane. And it kind of begs the question, who defines the lanes? Um, and even though there's not only one definition, I'm going to share one definition that at least gives you a point of departure. But one of the things I want to say before we get to that is that this whole topic about lanes and defining the lanes and so forth, this is a we question. It's not a me question. And I think as organizations, we get into trouble when we take a we question and answer it with a me answer. And that's a perfect setup for a conflict. Doesn't matter how good or how bad the answer is, it really is about whose answer it is and how do we get there. And so if it's a me solution to a we problem, we know it's not going to end up well. So you just kind of start with that. And so the theme I wanted to share today, and we can go to the next slide, and it's these 5 organizational roles. And I've had the good fortune of being able to work with organizations of all different stripes, purposes, sizes, and locations. And Tony, you and I started working together a long, long time ago. Yeah, at least 20 years, maybe longer. But here's one of the things that we found that's fairly universal. And in every organization, it doesn't matter whether it's government, corporate, charitable, you name it. Essentially, there are 5 roles that the organization consists of. And so on the screen, you'll see those 5 different functions. And there's the function of to govern, to lead, to manage, to micromanage, and to execute. Now, I don't know how you're thinking about it, but execute, it's not that one. It's the other one. Okay. So You see the function there. Let's look at another way of alignment on those functions, and that is the activity. So what is the activity of governance? Well, it has to do with establishing the mission, the direction, adopting policy, and then assessing performance against policy. At its essence, that's exactly what governance is. Leadership is not the same as governance, but ultimately, in our organizations, somebody's got to lead, and that has to do with delegation and direction. And then the number three, management, that's the activity of overseeing that which has been delegated. Micromanagement, it's interesting. A lot of times the term micromanagement is used with a negative connotation, but micromanagement is a key function in every organization. The activity there has to do with counting and controlling and minutia. Minutia is small things. It's not small things that don't matter. It's small things that do matter. And if we don't attend to them in the way and at the time when it's crucial, it's going to overwhelm the organization. We'll come back to some examples of that later. And then ultimately execution. Think about that as really the implementation of mission. So then another way to look at that is the question of who are these roles assigned to? And think about these five as being lanes. And there's Joseph. Great to have you in the room again today, Joseph. I think, Joseph, as far as I know, you may be the father of the youngest child in today's collection. Your youngest is how old today, Joseph?
He is 4 months old.
4 months old. So, man, the fact that you can do anything apart from that, kudos to you. So, anyhow, these roles are assigned as followed. Number one, the governance role is assigned to board. Leadership to the CEO. The management, think about supervisory staff, micromanagement, administrative staff, and then execution program staff. And I guess my sense of priority is, if only one thing happened, it's got to be the implementation of our programs, right? So think about frontline people, those who are at the very front line. And so you see these five organizational roles, and ultimately, if you look at the top line, you'll notice we've got a green stripe, and then everything else is in brown. And why is this? I want to distinguish between I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but kind of boil things down to, everything is either A or B. Well, I've come to the conclusion that everything in the world is either governance, or here's the alternative. Get ready for this. This is profound. It's not governance. Right? And so in your organization, and if we could just back up and look at those roles again, think about this, that from a perspective of the boardroom, if it's governance, it belongs in a boardroom. If it's not governance, it doesn't belong in the boardroom. So everything in the world falls into one of those two categories. It's either governance or not governance. And so when we think about staying in our lane, one of the things, actually, a lot of times, a lot of my work involves working with boards and board retreats. A lot of times I will ask a CEO in a board retreat to resign from doing the work of the board. And so oftentimes what happens is a CEO gets drawn into governance functions, oftentimes because the board isn't fulfilling the governance functions. So there's a vacuum there, and it tends to suck others into it. And so I'll ask the CEO to go on record as resigning from acting in the role of a board member. So that's, if I'm the CEO, I'm going to not do number one. I am going to do the things that are on the second line, And under my direction, we've got the 3, 4, and 5 that come in as well, right? And then I'll also ask the board to do the same. I'll ask the board members to stand up and go on record as resigning from doing anything but governing. And so, like I said, everything is either governance or non-governance. Now, I'll tell you, I've got a client right now where there was a lot of dysfunction between board and staff. And in this case, the board was getting sucked into operations because the operations weren't being well attended to by the board member, or excuse me, by the CEO. And so we had to make some changes so that everybody could take possession of their appropriate lanes and not get drawn off into something that they're not supposed to be doing. I use this example of when the agenda for the board meeting comes out, one of the first questions we want to ask as board members is, are the items on the agenda, are they governance or are they not governance? And if they're not governance, they should be removed from the agenda. Now, so the question, I'll use an example of something. I'm going to call this a micromanagement thing. Who should we rent porta potties from for our next big event? Tony, do you still do the event at the drive-in theater?
At the event at where?
At the
At the drive-in?
Yeah.
Well, we do that event. We just don't have it there, but yes.
Okay. Yeah. So anyhow, if we're having a big movie night at a drive-in theater, we want to make sure there are adequate restroom facilities. Well, the selection of which vendor to use for porta potties, is that a board action? Well, it shouldn't be, right? What's the job of the board? It's to adopt a mission, establish the direction, put policy in place, then ask yourself, are we performing according to policy? Well, if that devolves to a point of porta potties, then there's probably some degree of failure that's not being cared for at the appropriate level. So, but from an ordinary standpoint, no, let's don't be dealing with those issues in a boardroom. And so really, in a lot of ways, Aaron, if we could go to the next page, I think we got something we want to ask people to respond to from in the chat box. So we've got a question here. In your view, what do board members, think about your own organization, what do board members feel unequipped or ill-equipped to do? So before we go any further, I want to ask everybody, if just based on your own experience, if you'll just jot notes in the chat box. And okay, so one person, Tony, says fundraising. Board members feel unequipped or perhaps ill-equipped to do fundraising. Somebody else, fundraising and deal with conflict. Wow, that's interesting. Let's see what other people. Fundraising. I'm beginning to see a theme here. Aaron, is there a fundraising theme going on?
Well, and Jana, she was the first one to respond. She said fundraising also. So there's
Okay.
Corey, did we mention fundraising?
Did we mention fundraising? Man, I wasn't expecting this theme to show up so solidly, and it doesn't have to be that way. But think about as board members, from the perspective of a board member, what do I feel equipped or ill-equipped to do? Now, before we go on to the next piece, I'm just going to mention, let's see, this is August. In July, I began serving on a new board. Well, it's not a new organization, but I just joined this board. I'm not going to say which one because I'm not going to compliment the organization. It's a good organization, but a friend asked me to serve in a role. I agreed to do that. I still haven't been given the bylaws of the organization, and I'm being asked to do things that some of them I'm not even sure that that's what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to do. How would I know? I'd look at the bylaws, right? So that's something right now I feel unequipped or under-equipped to do anything on that organization because I have a real lack of clarity. And so then here, another note, Joseph said, unclear of their role. Yeah, that you just described me, Joseph. Thank you. And let's see, is it Corey? How to operate effectively as a board to govern and enable the executive director to do their job. Lines of responsibility, coming from a lot of different boardrooms in night and day difference from how we serve. So, yeah, I mean, these are all really relevant comments. There's a companion question I want us to put on the screen here for just a moment. And that is, how do we know? How do we know what board members feel? Well, sometimes we know because we tell them this is how you're supposed to feel. Not saying that's how it should be, but just real quickly, by a show of hands, who would say, I've ever seen something like that in my experience? Well, definitely, I'll plead guilty to that. Yeah, I see a raised hand from Corey. Thank you. But I'm just going to pause here for a moment and say, um, there should be among the board some process where we survey how are we doing as a board? Um, um, where are the gaps? What am I expected to do? How do I know that? How am I supposed to know that? What am I equipped or not equipped to do? And here's the reality. I'll share it. And again, this is from my experience of working for many decades with organizations of every different stripe. It's very rare that we have somebody serving in a board member role who has been trained, equipped to serve as a board member. And in fact, here's what happens a lot of times, and I'll use this phrase: we have people whose reputation exceeds their experience. So let's say I'm a bank president. Well, every bank president has been trained to serve as a member of a board of a nonprofit organization, correct? Not correct. And um, probably any formal training they have is zero, and any informal may be lacking. So here's a couple of concepts I just want to share with us as some challenge thoughts, but before we go to the next piece, and that is, ask yourself sometime. By the way, let's just do another show of hands. So by show of hands, who would say that you ever feel frustrated with a member of the board, whether you're a fellow board member or CEO? Who's ever been frustrated with board member performance on one topic or another? Now, I'm going to go on record, and maybe that's me being frustrated with myself, but I mean, it's pretty common. So I want to give you some questions to ask yourself regarding board members. What if they're doing their best? Have you ever considered, I'm frustrated, but maybe they're doing their best. What if they don't know what to do? Or if they don't know how to do what they're expected to do? Now, I want to offer that that's a very real possibility. Okay. We have people who aren't trained to do a thing, a specific thing. Their reputation is big. There's a reason why we recruited them on the board, but it's not the same thing as being on the board. So if maybe they are doing their best isn't real good because they haven't been trained to do any different. And so here's what we want to say is we want to equip them. Let's equip people to do the job that they have volunteered to do. And so if we go to the next slide, here's what I consider to be a reality. And if you want to make note of this and share it with somebody else, you can just blame Kent for this. But I want to say that you cannot expect board members to do anything that you have not equipped them to do. And so we have a theme here for fundraising. How were your board members equipped to raise money? Well, I'm going to tell you, and I don't know who's on your board, but I can almost guarantee you that here's how and where they learned how to raise money. Elementary school. Okay. How do we all raise money in elementary school? We're given a sign-up sheet. Yeah, we're knocking on the door and we're selling candy bars, cookie dough, pizza kits, wrapping paper. I see some smiles because you probably did that stuff yourself, right? Either you or your kids. And so, anyhow, we have this idea that fundraising, the definition of fundraising, is taking something that people already have or they don't want, selling it to them at an exorbitant price, and guilting them into action because if you don't buy my candy bar, then the swing set at my playground is going to gobble me up and it's going to be your fault. Okay, so anybody recognize that? I mean, that's one of the most common training programs in the United States of America, and we think it's fundraising. So that's the only training your board members had before they showed up. Now, who wants your board members to go out and sell candy bars on the street corner? It's a 25-cent candy bar, and we're selling, I don't even know what they sell for now. Let's say $5 and or more, right? And oh, plus there's a coupon on it for a discount on your next pizza. And that's fundraising. So, are your board members trained for fundraising? Yes. Is it the training you wish them to have? No way. You're not going to get any place selling $1 candy bars for $5. And people feel like, that's how we're going to save the world, right? But the point isn't about the candy bar, but it's the reality. If you haven't equipped the members of your board to do a thing, whether it's to hold a committee meeting, to do a program evaluation, to stay out of governance, excuse me, to stay in governance and out of operations. If they haven't been trained by you for that, then they're already probably doing their very best. They're just ill-equipped for the thing that we think everybody knows, and in reality, nobody knows but you. And so, next slide. This is a really an important introspective question. And actually, rather than having this be rhetorical, I'm going to ask for us to take a minute and just to jot down again in the chat box, what results have I equipped my board to deliver? Now, this is an opportunity for you to brag on yourself, brag on the organization, brag on the board member. What are some examples of specific results that we've equipped the board or members of the board to do? And I think somebody's being really candid here. Nada. We're just getting started. Well, so Janie, you have an advantage. You're early enough that you can say this and not feel embarrassed about it, right? For most of us, we're farther down the road and our answer may be the same, but maybe we don't want to say it because it reflects poorly on me or on somebody else. But anybody else, what are some, excuse me, some results that we have equipped our board to deliver?
I'm seeing gala sponsor fundraising, policy and procedure, some great things to equip the board to do. Give a tour to their network. So building those relationships in between their peer group and the organization, getting them on site, giving a tour. It's fantastic to do. Let's see. New to the board, but see the struggle to effectively engage the board. And that is a struggle. Speaker training to talk to crowds about organization. That's good too, because going back to that previous slide, if you haven't equipped them to do it, you can't expect them to be able to do it well. Bylaw review, updates, relationship engagement in the community. Done training with boards in the past with clear roles and responsibilities communicated. encourage them to encourage the staff?
So I want to say kudos to those who have made specific efforts to equip board members. And I hope that as each of us look at what's on the screen, there's somebody, and so let's see, I'm looking here. And Corey says, we've equipped our board members to review the bylaws and update them and have relationship engagement in the community. Well, let's say I look at that and say, you know what, man, I wish we had done that. Well, get ready, Corey. I'm going to volunteer you. Reach out to Corey. He's done it. Let's leverage his experience and benefit each other from that. Okay. And so, Corey, thanks for giving the thumbs up on that. But if if you see something on here or something we've talked about, you say, you know what, that's something I could use help with. Reach out. I don't know if they're going to say yes, but if you don't ask, I'm pretty sure they won't. So if something that Aaron contributed, you say, you know what, I think that'd be helpful to me. Reach out to Aaron. Reach out to me. And so we struggled to make change, and it was hard. You're not making that up, are you, Corey?
No. Can I speak? Can I just chime in real quick here? I joined our board 2 years ago in a ministry that was 38 years old, founded in 1983. My wife and I do ministry together. I have a private sector job, but I was invited to the board and then became chairman of our board, and it was a mess. Finances, nobody knew what to do. Volunteer, goal setting. People just showed up to vote on stuff. Board matters that were really operational. Who does what? What does the ED really do? Board members, staying in their lane. And it's actually still a challenge today. I'm still actually going through some stuff that I engaged our attorney on this morning. I had to go to him and say, actually, I need some legal advice right now with a board member that I might need to engage bylaw on us. And so it was tough, but I think just we crawl, walk, run, and prioritized what to do. And I asked for help. Lots of help on figuring this out, because I've never done this before. I'm on for-profit, private sector, private equity companies. Our board meetings are significantly different.
Yeah. Yeah. And so kudos to you, Corey. They are different, but here's what I want to say is they shouldn't be different. And by different, I mean functional versus dysfunctional. In the charitable sector, we ought to be leading the pack in terms of best practices. And I don't say that to shame anybody, but rather to inspire. Don't dilute expectations. How many times do I hear this? Well, we're just a nonprofit. We're doing the most important work in the world, right? And so don't give ourselves or anybody else a pass. And Corey, kudos to you for what you've accomplished there and for sharing that. And again, part of what we want to do is build up a community of leaders supporting leaders. So thank you for doing that. In fact, one of the, whether it's in times of crisis or times of ordinary operation, I'm going to just real quickly share a quote with you on the screen. And that is that under pressure, we don't rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training. That's why we train so hard. And that's not my quote. That's a quote from the U.S. Navy SEALs. Under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. That's why we train so hard. And so in our organizations, people are already doing the best they know how to do. We got to get better. And we get better through providing training, through setting expectations, through giving clear objectives, and then giving the tools that are necessary for success, for high-level success. And so with that, I kind of feel like I've done way too much talking. And since we've got the chat box open, if there are any additional questions, please share those in the box. Aaron, you may be able to pull some out. I noticed one that said earlier on, I think it was Joseph said, we're struggling to effectively engage the board. struggling to effectively engage the board. I've heard that many, many times. And here's one tool I want to give you on that topic. And this isn't just for Joseph, but for all of us. How do we measure engagement? Now, I'm going to give you a caution. A lot of times in a board meeting, I'll ask, what does it mean for a board member to be engaged? Here's the most common answer to that question. Well, everybody knows what it means for a board member to be engaged. When I hear that anything in a boardroom that starts with the phrase everybody knows, here's to interpret that into English. What that means is nobody knows. Okay. And so, and even if it comes out of your mouth, it comes out of mine. Well, everybody knows. Well, that means nobody knows. And so if we can't reduce it to writing, and it's been either individually subscribed to or adopted by resolution and board, then nobody knows what it is. So what is board member engagement? And this is another one of those fun things if you want to develop the board. Give everybody a blank sheet of paper. We're going to take 90 seconds to answer this question. To be engaged as a member of this board involves blank, and fill in the blank. And I think you're going to be surprised at what you see. Because for somebody, engagement means, well, I'll use this. I'm not going to say the organization, but had a client, and one member of the board said, our members of the board aren't engaged because they're not present every time the doors are open. This is for program. Now, is that an expectation of board members? Well, it was by this board member. I can tell you it wasn't the expectation by many, perhaps by any other member of the board. So that's an expectation, but it's not a mutually adopted expectation. What is expected of board members? Well, somebody says, well, we all need to be really passionate about it. Okay, who defines what's really passionate? My expression of passion is not going to be the same as your expression of passion. So how will you know? Well, I feel really, really, really strong. Well, you didn't say really 6 times. You only said it 4 times. So that's not as strong. I mean, these things sound silly, right? But if we want people to be engaged, we have to have a definition of engagement. And there are some really specific ways that people can be engaged. But by having one of the things that we recommend is expectations of service. And the expectations of service are as a set of expectations that are adopted by the board, and then they're individually subscribed to by members of the board, and then that writing is shared with prospects to add to the board so that before they say yes, they know what they're saying yes to. Aaron, what topics or questions do we have to
Yeah, I
speak
had one question come up, and I'm gonna highlight one comment made by the wonderful Pam Lilly, who's on the call. But she
to?
made
Hey,
a
Pam.
comment earlier. She said that she's trained her board to host a table at a fundraising event. And I want to highlight this for a couple of reasons. One, when a board member signs up, they're probably not volunteering to be on the board to host a table at a fundraising event. But what a great thing for the board members to do. And I love that Pam equipped her board to know how to do that, because it goes back to that principle. If you haven't equipped them, you can't expect them to know what they want to do. And this goes to the point of training is an ongoing thing. And there are things that you can do internally, like, hey, we have our annual gala coming up. You're going to be at a table. Here's what I want you to do. Engage with other people at the table this way. Maybe you start the bidding wars on the auction items, whatever the things are. But until we ask and train our boards to do those things, even that small little things like that, it's not fair to expect them to do anything else. And if we haven't taken the time to articulate that, it's that word expectation is huge. It's just not fair to expect anything different. Corey had a great question. What are the top 3 priorities or things you wish to see carried out or fulfilled. And this is in context. They're doing some board training next week, and then a 2025 vision and mission casting meeting in October to ensure that they know where they want to go and what they want to task the executive director with. So in that, what are top 3 priorities or things you wish to see carried out or fulfilled?
So, Corey, is that a question you're asking board members?
I think that was just a comment for just a couple minutes ago. I think
Okay.
it passed from what we were talking about. It was just I can't remember at this point, but I thought I'd quickly type in since you guys were talking, but just kind of what we're doing as a board on how talking about roles and responsibilities for people, I think is where what it tied back to.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aaron, I think what you just described, Tony just answered.
Yeah, it's perfect. Tony dropped a comment, just a few suggestions of how we do continuous training with our board on their roles. First of all, they give them the new board members a welcome box, which has some swag and such. Also includes a copy of the book by Kent, The Intentional Board. So free plug there. How about that for some promo?
Whoa.
It is available on Amazon if you want to go buy it. I also asked the board development committee to present a 5 to 8 minute board training video at the start of every board meeting. Man, that's great. Getting the board engaged to equip the board, and then they spend about 5 minutes discussing it and how to apply it. Great practice there. And that goes back to the question. If we're going to go back to this slide here, you can't expect the board members to do anything you haven't equipped them to do. Who is you? Is this the executive director? Is this development director? Is this a fellow board member? How would you answer that question, Mr. Stroman?
Well, Mr. Stroman, thank you for asking that question and dumping it on me. The you is you. Doesn't matter what role. If you're a board officer, you can't expect. If you're a CEO, you can't expect. Joseph, your question as development, you can't expect. And so, I think we've all heard that expression. If it is to be, it is up to me. And this is one of those places where I think we just take ownership. And I remember for a lot of years, I was not a member of this board, but I served the board. I didn't serve on the board. And so I began to realize I couldn't expect anything from the board members as vice president for development if I hadn't taken the initiative to equip them. And so again, I think that's just one of those things. We just have to personalize it. And even though I may not have a clear formal responsibility or role, but I still need to do what I can. Sometimes we mustn't. If I'm not on the board, I can't do the work of the board. I can't do the work for the board, but I still have to do the work through the board. And so just ask, whatever role you're in, what's the avenue? It still has to get done. What's my part in doing it? And sometimes it's equipping a member of the board to equip the board. Corey, you've got a hand up.
We'll take myself off mute here. That's really helpful. I wanted to share just with everybody else. I try to just give feedback on what we struggled with. And one of the things we noticed is this I'm really glad I joined this webinar today. Your email was forwarded to me this morning by one of our staff members. And I'm like, oh, it's this morning. I'm glad I jumped on because like everything we're going through is so relevant for the topic for today, for between you and Aaron. I'm really appreciative of this. One of the things I noticed when we sat at the board meeting was everybody had great hearts, but then started asking our question is everybody at the table should bring a unique skill set. And it seemed a lot of people just were, and I understand now how nonprofits work is you will take the help you can get because these aren't paid positions. So they were just bodies to fill seats to vote or, raise hands or just come once a month. And then they dispersed. And what we worked on is identifying is I noticed I think Tony, you talked about just the committees as we struggle. We still need to figure out the committee groups and how to equip people with tasks of you're in this X committee, finance committee, you're in the develop committee, and how that ties back to what their giftings are and how they can excel in the role to help us. That way, everybody's doing something versus coming up. And once again, I'll have to go back to wearing out our executive director, who seems to be doing everything. And that's how I think burnout happens. And then there's tension on the board. I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, excellent.
Well
My
said.
goodness, Aaron, is it almost 10:47?
We're getting close.
Wow, man, this has been so robust. But you put in there what's your top takeaway in the chat box. I would love to hear from everybody. Just one thing that you feel like you can put to use today before the sun goes down, or maybe tomorrow before lunchtime. But in the meantime, Aaron, you've got a really cool an announcement, something that's coming up, and something that happened just very recently. Would you share that?
Oh, yeah. Couple things. Couple things. First of all, if you just need some help bringing clarity into the boardroom, one of the things that Stroman and Associates does, board retreats, governance work. So if you want some outside help, that's what we do. We're talking about it. That's where a lot of this experience comes from. So we're available to help. This is another training that we do for boards. This is staff and volunteer roles, including board members, Asking Academy. It's the most in-depth major gift fundraising training in the US, 4-month program, but there's 2 days on site that you spend together. And we teach board members and staff members how to work together as a team to raise money. We had a client go through had an organization go through less than a year ago, and I got a phone call yesterday saying that they had their biggest gift yet come through, $750,000. This is an organization whose annual operating budget's $1 million, so a one-time gift of 75% of that was revolutionary. And when the guy called me to tell me, he said, "The Asking Academy works." He was just so excited. He trusted the system and got results like he had never seen before. So, and this goes to show too, just a principle. You don't have to be the one always teaching the skill. If you're not qualified to, bring in the expert. There was time when I worked with adults who mentor teenagers. I brought in people to talk about abuse because I wasn't qualified to do that. So it's okay to bring other people in. If we need to be talking about fundraising training or governance work, feel free to email us, or you can drop a note in the chat box saying, "Please help. Here's my email or cell phone number." Go to askingacademy.com also. Forgot that was part of the slide. And then next month's 47-minute webinar, leading the development office. So we're going to kind of hone in on what does it mean to lead the development office. So if you're an executive over the development office, maybe the VP or executive or whatever else configuration there, we're going to give some best practices on how to lead, how to recruit, train, equip, hold accountable, compensate. What does it look like to lead the development office the best way possible? So that's coming up September 10th. So next 47-minute webinar. Kent, do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say
Close
thanks
with?
everybody for being here today and for making this such an interactive session.